Hey up, welcome to another episode of the Rugby League Outsiders. Now recently Carl and I headed off to the nation's capital and we interviewed Nash Cohen and Stephen Guan, two influential people in the capital in regards to Rugby League. Nash is the head of talent pathway at London Broncos. So we're going to dive into what they're doing to develop talent within London. And also Stephen Guan is the Southern Region's Development Officer for the RFL. So he covers a vast area and he's got quite a job on his hands, but we're going to chat to him and see what his vision for the southern regions of Rugby League is. So let's dive right into it now.
So I think it's really good if we just have a couple of minutes of like what your roles are and what your responsibilities are, and then we'll dig into some other questions then.
Definitely you first.
That's cool.
Yeah, so my name's Steve Cohen. I work for the Rugby Football League. My official title is Southern Regions Development Manager.
Yeah. So just give us a bit of a rundown of what areas those cover, because I think we need to define the south a little bit there.
Yeah, so we call it the Southern Regions. So it's made up of the Midlands, London and the southeast, west of England, and then the southwest. So really important to define those areas. Part of my job is to sort of work as a collective across the four regions and bring those in to sort of be able to share the resource and maximise outcomes. But at the same time, they'll all have different priorities and different focus areas. So it's making sure that we can do both, I guess.
Brilliant. Nash?
So my name is Nash Cohen. I am the head of Broncos Talent Pathway, which is essentially looking after all the programs running from under 12 all the way through to under 18 at the top, and then feeding into our reserve grade and the first team. So a lot going on and feeding in from the south, a lot of different areas. We have to pull together the various talent pool, understand where they are, work with their coaching systems to uplift that core development skill, which is what we're always looking for, and then bring them through into the Broncos pathway.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. So guys, first thing I'll ask you, a bit of a random question, but you're clearly not from the south, you're neither of you are Londoners. Just explain to us how you got to where you've ended up. Really.
Can I step in there?
Yeah.
I'm 100% at London.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What are you picking up a twang in my accent?
100%, mate.
I did live in South Africa for about 9 years, so that.
Right.
But yeah, no, I'm born and bred London.
Oh right. Yeah. I do apologise.
Yeah.
Where from?
Well, I grew up in northwest London. And I live in northwest London, so I've expanded my horizons. A couple of streets, that's about it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, so nice.
There's no way you're from London, Steve.
No. I moved over from a little town in Australia called Inverell in 2007. So came over to play rugby league.
Yeah.
Moved over had a cousin that was playing with South London Storm back then. That's what their name was, and we came over just to play with him and travel. Really, that was the main thing. Become really good mates with the guy that was doing the community work for the club. He actually was going the other way, so we sort of hung out and became really good mates within that 2-month period. And then he went to Australia, and I took over his job doing the community work in South London. And through that job, met my now wife, and yeah.
The rest is history.
Yeah. Long history. Yeah.
So Nash, I mean, how did Rugby League end up on your radar?
Well, it's actually interesting. I was 18 at the time, and I got selected for London Broncos' first ever academy, which was back in '96. So I was with the club back then, long time ago. Saw some amazing things happen when London Broncos was really kicking off. Big attendances at Charlton, which is where we played, and the Stoop afterwards. Saw a whole load of great players. They brought over about 9 Brisbane Broncos under-19 academy players who couldn't quite make the grade there, but they wanted to test them in the water here. That was when we had that connection with Brisbane. And yeah, what a fantastic experience. Learned so much. Left rugby shortly afterwards, had about 25 years in business. Decided during COVID that, the time was to stop business and do what I really love, which was rugby. Got my rugby qualifications, did a few other things here and there in coaching. Eventually approached the club again, got a role last year. That's kind of what's led me here to this place.
It's incredible. I mean, just hearing people's stories and how they got into rugby, how they found rugby league, and you know what I mean, and how it sort of permeates through every aspect of their life. It's fascinating.
Well, besides the lessons I learned, one thing I'll say about the sport itself, I was a rugby union player. So I played around the corner school just in Hammersmith called St Paul's. Very high level rugby union, but fast, quick, never really got the ball. Got I think, spotted by a guy called Tony Ray. You might be familiar with him.
Yeah.
Tony Ray spotted me one day doing some sprint training down at Barnet Copthall, which is near where I live, where the club used to do a bit of training. Invited me along, got there, saw all these huge monsters and thought, how was little me going to compete? But rugby league's one of those sports where if you've got heart, you can compete with anyone. And I learned that. And that, again, positive life lessons you learn. But I think the bigger thing was suddenly playing rugby at a level which A, was what I wanted to do, a commensurate of where my skills were. B, I got the ball. In rugby union, I was sitting on the wing, not getting the ball. Suddenly I find rugby league, and what a sport. So yeah, great journey as well.
And that was 30 years ago. You know, you look at rugby union now, and I do wonder how what some people get from playing that sport, because, you know, chance of getting ball.
We have a lot of players cross over, obviously, especially in the south. And one of the biggest things I find is that exactly that. It's the player gets more involved. There's more one-on-one activity. My key point to any sort of rugby union coach that maybe has challenges around their players playing rugby league is they'll come back to you better players.
Yeah.
Because they get more opportunities. The coaching's pretty good level, but actually they'll get more time on the ball.
That's always what stood out to me. As soon as I found rugby league, and at my school we had former England internationals coaching us rugby, but I learned more about rugby union playing rugby league at Broncos than I ever did with rugby union. And coaching has come on a bit, but I'm still involved in rugby union here and there. Don't tell all your audience. I still think exactly that. The coaching levels we have in rugby league are extremely professional. And I suppose it's a different sport. We have far less things to worry about, so we do it better in attack and defence.
Yeah. Guys, we've come on this southern trip to talk to many clubs and influential people within the south. Obviously, I can't leave without sort of speaking to you guys what your plans are for the next sort of 12 months, and I can put that to both of you, really.
Yeah, so currently we're working through the community rugby league strategy. So that was a strategy that was released off the back of the RFL strategy in 2022. That runs effectively through to 2023. As part of the community strategy, there's a load of different frameworks. Southern regions having one themselves. Probably one of the main points that, especially in this next 12 months, that I'll be looking at is in trying to improve the infrastructure of the game in the south, in the community game. So I sit in development, so it's all about grassroots and the community game, but there's loads of things that we can do to try to improve the game profile, obviously being one that will help. But for me, we need a good, strong infrastructure. Clubs need to be strong. We need the right processes in place for when that profile does increase. Then when we have that influx of people into the game, there's a vehicle that lets them come into it and then take part. So very much we try to introduce a few things last year. So it's building on those, one of those being a development forum that sits across those 4 regions. So that's made up of key stakeholders from different parts of the game, working with those guys to help us at the RFL. Well, they're the guys on the ground, so they can provide the insight and a bit more experience and help us deliver development plans for each of those regions that ties into that strategy. So that's sort of the main objective for 2024.
And Nash?
So yeah, I think the main, issue where it hasn't gone well in the past is maybe not really understanding that our success at Broncos is very much about the success at community level. The elite and community are 2 different things. They're not. They're part of the same pathway. One leads into the other. So from what we're trying to do, and really I'll give you an overview of our program, it's assess where all the skills are. So we now have grading days where we bring in community players, identify exactly where they are, give them honest feedback, give them a scoring, which then goes back to them as players and to their coaches. We then visit the coaches, we visit the clubs and the community clubs and look to uplift those skills so that when players do come through our pathway, A, they're further along with their core skills development, because I think that's where COVID certainly had a big thing to play with how their development actually happened. Secondly, they can advance at the rate they want to. I think the other thing to realise with development is it's not a straight line. Some people develop on a very high curve and some people develop at a lower curve, especially with us in the South where we don't play rugby league from necessarily at the earliest age. It's really important to understand that, because you don't want to put someone off who has all the character inside to be a top performer, but maybe on a different physical or technical curve. So with this system we're bringing in, that's very much what we're trying to do. keep our hands on the pulse of all the talent and let it develop at the rate which is right for them. Give them relative opposition and make sure they can compete and then actually continue their journey. We don't want to lose people in rugby league at whatever level it is. So that's very much what we're trying to do over the next 12, 24, 36, 60 months, really.
Yeah.
Hopefully we see the results of it after that.
So that's going on. I'm right in thinking London's changed strategy a little bit, haven't they, with how they do their academy and their pathway system? Because did you stop the elite academy last year?
Yeah.
And the reason behind that was to focus on different areas?
I think so. The strategy, in my mind, beyond possibly the return on investment, also the strategy wasn't right for where we're at.
Yeah.
We were sending, had a high-level program, extremely professional and well-run, an elite program, but we were sending kids who hadn't played rugby league for that long into scenarios where they're getting beaten between 50 and 90 points. I think we won one game in the academy last season. Now, how much does that do for player development? The reality is it doesn't. But it's not to say those kids won't, as they probably will in the next few years, go on that curve that gets them to the top. So yeah, we have changed it. We've also recognised that we compete down here in the south with rugby union. There's some wonderful players that we can bring in if the season is more accommodating to their requirements as it stands. And just to make the point, that's not just for boys, that's for girls as well, leading into our ladies team, which is extremely successful.
Yeah.
We have to be able to harness that interest, develop it further, build the community, which is bums on the seats, and just be there from that whole process, from the bottom of the pyramid right the way through to the top. And I think that's probably our main focus over the next 12 months. And all I'll say is, I was a big fan of last year's system because it was the academy. It was what I had known and grown up with. Great experience for anyone. But what we're offering now is probably a lot more suitable for where our players are and where we are in the south. We still have elite programs at under 16 and under 18 level, and for the first time ever, under 16 girls, which is awesome. And that will develop into an under 18 and slightly older development squad for ladies as well. But it's not that kind of 25-week program of intensity where we're playing Wigan and St Helens every week and maybe not the right level of opposition for where we're at.
Okay.
I think the other thing to mention there too is there's obviously a proud tradition, a historic tradition of that pathway coming from London and the south, and then we've got players that have represented the country, played at the top level over here and in Australia. You have a look at the Broncos squad, the majority of those players have came up through that pathway. So it's probably for a different time. That pathway suited then.
Yeah.
We're obviously changed now. The game's changed down here. You go back, you go back when I first came over to London and we had 30 either full-time or part-time RFL staff because we had more money coming in from Sport England to be able to run British programs. That's changed. So the landscape has changed a bit. But I would say is there is still a pathway, probably more suited and more favourable to clubs and players that they can access it. But there is still a pathway there that will hopefully drive those players into higher opportunities and into the club.
I imagine you two guys are working closer together more than ever then now.
Yeah, yeah.
We see a lot of each other.
He's a good guy too, so that's well. But yeah, no, I know everyone, and obviously Nash is one person at the club, but I know the club have been working really hard ever since they've got back into the Super League, which is great. And I give a shout out to John Keys, who's a community manager, who's done a massive amount of work across a lot of areas of the club, maybe not even in his role, but because of his experience and knowledge, he's sort of been right there supporting the club. And I think it'll hopefully everyone will see that when they attend their first home game.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you're out on a bit of a limb. Okay, you're down in Nation's capital. Okay, miles from the heartlands. We know what that feels like being in the Midlands and that. Do you feel that? And if so, how do you feel? How do you feel that?
Can I step in there? Because this is something I've thought, even with the talent that we have produced over the years, and you can't argue with it. You've got players in NRL now, trailblazing. We've only ever scratched the surface here in London. Look at the catchment area, look at the range of sports and development and money that's spent down here on sport. There's so much skills to transition from other sports and from other people that we've never even got close to. So the opportunity still remains huge. I think where we now think is that actually the system we've devised and we're working with will actually bring up that talent en masse. And I think that's probably one of our biggest strategies, to realise that actually, yeah, we've done great, but we've never actually scratched the surface of this animal.
Yeah. I mean, we recognise that because obviously we're just on the outskirts of Birmingham, so that's like the second biggest city in the country. Exactly. So you've got the two most popular, densely populated areas in the country, and rugby league is it's a small vein that runs through that. So huge areas for growth. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, well, I've been here since 2007, so I can see the opportunities there is. And Nash is right that just the population density just tells you that there's more opportunity in terms of population as a standstill. So for me, I've seen it where we had all that staff, all those clubs, and yes, the game was thriving more because you had more. It's just natural, you have more resource. So as part of my role, it's because while I am the only staff member at the RFL based in the south of the country, I still sit in a team in my development team. So it's and across other sections or areas of the RFL. So part of my role is making sure that the clubs and the school competitions and any sort of stakeholder in the south of the country is making sure they're getting the right level of support from those colleagues as well. Because it's not just me there is a team behind me, but sometimes because of the geographical challenges or just the knowledge, that support doesn't always get to the right places. So that's definitely something I'm trying to improve.
So who do you think are the key personalities, perhaps at the grassroots of rugby league in the capital?
Well, for me, it's clubs. Clubs the main. That's the heart, the beating heartbeat of the community game.
He wants names.
Yeah.
Don't defer. I'll pass it to you for the names. I'm just building you up. But people always say, it's challenging in the south, and why do clubs worry about it? But why do they do it? It's because they love the sport. Yeah. Like I would say, look, every club's got challenges. Don't matter where you are in the country, but clubs down here work extremely hard, and they don't have challenges that other clubs might have in the country. So they're really committed. They're the guys that we're trying to get in behind and support. In terms of key stakeholders, what do we want names to name people?
It's nice
doing a good job.
Recognise people that are doing a good job, and you know what I mean. Obviously, we probably won't mention everybody that deserves a mention, but for those that on the tip of your tongue or whatever. Dish the dirt, Steve.
I've got. Well, if you're not ready, I've got.
You go. Back.
So, and to me, this is the community level that if we didn't have this, no sport. It's the volunteers. They make up our game, and there's so much more of a part of it than we realise. So, I mean, I have a contact at every club, and pretty much, every single one, A, we've got a great relationship with, but B, we are working with now to help kind of go further than we've ever done before. The people that will stick out are the ones probably have the slightly bigger operations. So Kevin Rudd at Elmbridge does a great job. Tank Sherwood, Anthony Sherwood up at Brentwood, fantastic. I deal with Aid Kerr on the girls' side, up at Hemel Stags. Who else? Philippa, obviously the LJL, and Brixton Academy. Brixton Bulls. Then there's quite a few more. Nikki as well from Bromley Bengals. So there's some great personalities, tireless servants of the game. And like I say, the game doesn't exist without them. So you need those people who actually, they're not just here turning up and doing a job, because that is what everyone does pretty much in life. They are giving up their own time, and bigger than that, their passion and their energy. And that to me is what is so awesome about this club game and where we see it now. And if they've got that, I think now what they've got here at Broncos, because we've changed our system slightly, we are so much more connected with them. They've got a willing partner on the other side who wants to help them, share their problems, get them support that they need, and not have to focus on everything else, just focus on those things to start with. And it's starting to work. I'd like to think any of those people I just mentioned, hopefully a few more, if they sat here, would say, yeah, we're now doing a good job, we're now communicating, we're now working together, and the future looks very exciting.
Yeah. So just not to leave the other southern regions out. So if we look at the Midlands, you've got guys like Fred Baker, who he actually chairs the Southern Regions Development Forum with me. We've got a guy like Phil Abbott, who has sort of driven the junior league, the Midlands juniors, a long way forward and put some really good processes in place. Without those sort of guys, again, nothing's happening. If we go over to the west of England, you've got guys like Simon Martin of the All Golds, who's been a really big influence on the game in there. Then you've got a guy like John Connaughton at Oxford Levellers.
Phil Ward
down in Sussex, down in Brighton and Hove. And then you got like a Rob Butland down in Cornwall, who's sort of obviously now involved in Cornwall Rugby League, but has been there for 10, 15 years with Cornish Rebels and sort of building that sort of that footprint down across all areas of the south.
If anything, I think I know I'm doing something right because I've been in contact with every single one of those people over the last over the last 12 months. So yeah.
Well, and it's a miss not. You have to mention that there is loads more.
Yeah.
You just the list is just too long to name everyone, but it's really important that those without that, and this is the whole part of trying to work in with these regional development forums and trying to support those volunteer and the stakeholders, because they can help us drive the game and improve the game and show us sort of and work with us to find the right direction forward.
Just switching to like the Broncos, when you get the teams when the supporters come to watch the match, what is their take on like coming to London? Do they seem to make an event of it, like a bit of a social of it, or are they in and out?
So I follow the fan pages on Facebook.
Yeah.
I can't comment on them obviously, but I follow them avidly, and I love what I see. A, they're passionate.
Yeah.
B, absolutely that's what they do. I mean, for the final last year to lose, they were off. It was like Barmy Army on holiday. And they have built up, probably without even necessarily much assistance of the club, they've built up their own culture. And they drive it, and it's awesome. And like you see the interaction when the first team play with the fans, and they know half of them because they are tireless supporters. 100%, I think they've done a great job in kind of creating their own identity. And what is a Bronco fan? You go and have a look at those pages, you'll see it's a lot of passion there.
Yeah, I've seen on the London Broncos fan page is a huge banner that seems to turn up at a lot of games. It says, not just a northern thing on it, is what he says.
That's quality.
So that's a big shout out, and if he's watching, I hope he is, he probably will be, to Lee Bounds, who is actually quite a new supporter in terms of coming to Broncos, but he's made up for the last 20 years of not being here with 20 years of action in 1 year.
Yeah.
Absolutely tireless, that guy. And there's a few like that who just, Broncos mad. We win, lose or draw, they're fully behind them. And I think that is what a true supporter is, isn't it?
Awesome.
And I think also it allows the travelling fans from other clubs to come down and experience the capital as well. We run a primary festival before the Challenge Cup final, where we get a lot of attendance from the southern clubs, obviously from under 7s to under 12s, but we do get a lot of different clubs coming down from the north and using it as that weekend to sort of come down and have a couple of nights, give the kids a good experience in the morning, and then they go and they can watch obviously the Challenge Cup finals in the afternoon. They also do a pitch parade before the kickoff of the men's game. So I think that obviously the kids like that and they love the experiences, but I think the parents are the ones that probably enjoy it just as much because they get to come down and have a couple of nights, and they're just sort of smothered by rugby league in the capital, which is great.
I think we probably don't appreciate actually what a draw card London is because we live in it.
Yeah.
But absolutely, the rest of the country, this is our capital. You love it or hate it, it's a special day to come down to London, isn't it?
Yeah, so we feel today, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely chipped out. But I tell you, like one of my probably my second earliest. My first memory of rugby league was terrible. Like I was freezing, stood on the side of the touchline, I hated it. My second earliest memory was, I remember early morning piling into the car with my family, and we drove down to Wembley. I remember the traffic being horrendous, and it was 1986, so it was a long time ago. And I remember getting in the crowd. The atmosphere at Wembley was just incredible. And I remember this guy, I don't know who he was, and he saw me, young kid, in the crowd, and he gave me a flag, a Halifax flag. You know what I mean? He goes, yeah, lad, you can wave that. And that was my kind of my one of my earliest memories. What connection do you have with Wembley, and is that part of the draw of coming to London as well?
So one of my earliest memories of, and this is a kid growing up in Australia where rugby league was just in your face all the time, was getting up early on a Saturday morning watching Challenge Cup games.
Yeah.
And then and don't know what it was, but the atmosphere in the crowd seemed different. And I can really remember that. And obviously having Australian players in those English teams sort of probably linked me over there as much. But actually, Wembley's amazing. Before I sort of went into my current role, I used to work in the education team, and we ran all the like champion schools competitions in the country. And something that is probably unique to rugby league is and I don't know if you know it, but the Year 7 final at the champion schools competition, the boys' final, is played on Wembley Stadium, Stadium on the grass.
Yeah.
And just having the opportunity to be able to go onto that grass, where as a kid I was watching and just thought it was amazing. Because the other thing too that's connected to that was obviously the Kangaroo Tours, and when Australia came over and played Great Britain, it's just I don't know, it's one of those historic places where rugby league is sort of cemented, and to be able to then go in, not just walk around the stadium and get in behind all the different corridors and the changing rooms and that, but to see to walk on the grass, and they're really strict. They won't let anyone walk on the grass, so you've got to be quite lucky to get there.
Sounds like my wife.
Well, sometimes you have to, because they put a lot of time and energy into that grass. It was just amazing. Yeah, I don't know what you're.
So it's a bit. Farmers been a bit different for me because as a player, I'm a terrible fan, and I'm not a supporter. Really, before Broncos, if you ask me who my favourite team was, I don't care. I'm here to play. So my experiences or memories are very much linked back to Broncos, and the two that stand out was at Charlton Athletic just before the main game, and we lost in our academy season. We had 20 games to play, so it was a big season. We lost our first 10. Okay, this was because half the boys in our team were rugby union boys. We learned the game. The second 10, we won every single one, including beating Wigan at home by about 30 or 40 points. There was about 13,000 people in the crowd as we finished. So that for me was a really strong memory. The other one was Odsal, because Odsal was such an iconic stadium.
Yeah.
And playing in that, it's an amazing experience when you go and suddenly it appears out of nowhere. So those are my two memories. I mean, Odsal actually has always been my favourite stadium. When we went back last year with the reserves and the academy, it was great to walk in and see it. And I know it's changed a lot since those days.
It's been nice when they finish it.
All roads lead to Odsal.
Absolutely.
Right. Looking at the sort of, you mentioned on the sort of the pathways and things, and so what sort of things are actually London Broncos actually physically doing with the community clubs in the area? Is it tickets to games? Is it?
I think it's a twofold process. The first one is we're working with them, and by working with them, we're having Lions development days every 6 to 8 weeks. We see over the last 4 days from last week and this week, we saw 250 kids. We had a top coaching team there in Chris Baxter, Colin Baker. These are great names from the rugby world. Tony Musgraves was involved with the reserves. We were assessing them. So we were identifying where they are, what their scores were, sending that information back, as we mentioned. The next stage, as I say, is us getting down there. And then that leads into tickets. But I think that's also part of the commercial solution. It's not that it's my position to say.
Yeah.
But part of the way it works is if you have a strong tie with the community, then when you do go and offer tickets, people take them up and they feel very much part of the Broncos family. So I think the main thing I was trying to say to all the kids, players and parents last week was, this is the start of your opportunity. It's not the end. Our system does not spit you out now. It works with you over the next few years and make sure you can be where you are. Secondly, welcome to the family. You are now part of our community. You are part of our talent pathway. So we'll support you, and we very much hope you support us. But that was kind of, without even needing to be said, was implied. Yes, exactly.
It sounds like, we spoke to a few people, different, developing regions and all that kind of stuff, but it just sounds like, if you was to sum it up, you're just taking it serious, like, you know what I mean? You're not playing at this. It's like, no, we're committed, seeing people every 6 weeks. There's a certain amount of commitment there, and it definitely sounds.
Well, it's interesting. So I went and spent a day or two up with Shane Eccles up at Wigan, who's their head of youth. And at the time I was doing it just for a little bit of CPD. I didn't have any idea that I'd end up in this role with the youth system. But what I saw from him was really, interesting. He, exactly like we are trying to do, had his hand on the pulse of all the talent, where they were, how they were developing. A big aspect to it, as we all know, is coachability and character. So these are the sort of metrics that I took away from them and went, okay, well, if we're going to run a system in a similar way, doesn't need to cost the earth. You just need to be organised with it.
Yeah.
So structure it in such a way that we produce information that has value. B, we say, look, that's not keeping you out of, anything. That means we can work with you now over the next few years. Where it's worked very well hand in glove with the RFL is then by reaching out to Phil Joneses of this world, understanding the player framework that needed to be, set in place by the RFL, kind of mimicking that, in effect mimicking it, means we're kind of on the same page. So all of us are now heading towards these core skill developments. I just saw Mike Eccles walk through the background, and he'd tell you himself, that's what he's after. He needs players with the core skills, so when they get to the first team, they're doing those basics right. And so, it's wrong of us to kind of get kids at 16, at 18, which is what we're happening, and go, well, why aren't your skills here? Why aren't your skills there? It's our responsibility to make sure everything in the region, the volunteers, the clubs, the community clubs, are supported so that they can deliver it. Because otherwise we're doing it alone. We've got to work together. If we don't work together, we're not getting anywhere. Yeah. But if we come together, as we alluded to before, this is a powerhouse of what rugby could be,
So I think the other thing to add to what Nash has put in place is that, so they have the open access days at 12s to 15s periodically through the year. They've also then...
What's an open access day? Is it
it's like the Lions development.
Oh, okay.
So it's open to the wider, right? There's more room there. Come later in the year, there'll be a more bespoke, regular program for 16s and 18s called Origin Elite.
Sounds great.
Which will then take those, well, that's the sort of the next step in that pathway. Allows the coaches to have a bit more one-on-one time, touch time with those players. And then that will go into a 3-game series. But also the club will look to, because you can develop the players as much as you want, but you're only going to see them, especially in those the LDP days, only every 6 weeks. So there needs to be a piece of work where we support the coaches in the community clubs where those guys go back and they see them once or twice a week. They're interacting with the Broncos coaches as well. They're sort of feeding in, this is the sort of stuff we'd like you to work with your players. This is where they sort of maybe need a bit more strengthening up. So all of a sudden, at the bottom of that sort of pyramid, you've got those coaches sort of speaking the same language as the Broncos coaches and then trying to sort of improve, working together. Because effectively, that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being on the same page, giving the same message to that player to be able to improve, and that'll help that journey on quicker.
And the Origin Elite is an exciting program. It is essentially our academy and scholarship program condensed into 12 weeks. Okay, we can't obviously call it an academy, but it'll have the same holistic principles. So we're not just coming in doing advanced rugby coaching. It's a whole range of physical conditioning side, there's the nutrition side, there's the performance testing side, the video analysis, the psychology training, and we'll pack all those things into 12 weeks to give a really rich playing experience. But what we won't do is destabilize the club season. And that's probably our biggest step forward, because before these kids were leaving their clubs, they were leaving their clubs unsupported and kind of in tatters.
Yeah.
So for us, it's about giving more playing and development opportunities than there were before. And I think that works with the new system.
And Steve, the Southern Conference League, where does the Community League, where does that fit into? Because the Southern Conference League now is a really strong division, and are you using those teams almost like, because if London doesn't have 18, 19-year-old players don't have anywhere to go, do they, after that? Are you going to start to use the SCL as almost like a training base for these, to keep an eye on these players that they're not quite ready for academy, but they are of that age?
Yeah, well, we've seen that. We talk about a player pathway coming up from junior age groups, but we've seen that, and recently with Jared Bassett, haven't we? He was playing in SCL, a standout with West Warriors, and then moved into Scholars at League One, and then moved into Broncos at Championship, and now he's currently in Broncos at Super League. So there's some really, really strong, talented players in the SCL. Where the SCL will sit will be quite important, I think, in the next couple of years when you sort of work out what's happening at the top with all the IMG stuff. At the moment, we're just trying to improve the standards of those teams. So obviously been working at that since 2019, trying to every year lift those standards a little bit better to try to, you lift the standards, you get everything improves as coaches improve and players improve. But very much I see that being a sort of a natural stepping stone into that. And players come up through that
Well, yeah, you got
programs you're talking.
West's Warriors are linked with Cornwall, haven't they now? So it feels like, probably shouldn't say it, but it feels like League One and SCL, they're probably not that far away, are they now?
I think you could probably pick some teams out of the SCL, and we've seen this in the success.
In the Challenge Cup, yes.
And this year Hammersmith have seen, like getting an SCL team to the fourth round is pretty amazing. But they're competitive too. That's the other thing. I went, well, you were there too, or you might not remember much of it, the SCL.
Got knocked out, yeah.
But that game was unbelievable.
Yeah, the standard was,
it was such, probably one of the best games I've seen down here from an amateur point of view. And like, I've not watched much NCL, but I would expect that would be quite competitive in that, and not just the sort of the bottom half of teams, maybe sort of towards the top end.
Yeah, I think I know it was a high standard, because one of the things I could remember after I'd been brought back around was I remember sitting with some of our teammates, and they were sort of going, I wonder how we'd fare, going up against the SCL sort of time. And then they watched it, and I saw the look on people's faces like, I'd say, this is really, really high standard.
Yeah. And you're going to get that, especially with the sort of the more Australian-based teams like Hammersmith.
Yeah.
They've got players coming over that are playing sort of bottom tier NRL, like they've come up through
Cup and that sort of thing.
Come up through their play programs and that. And you will have teams that might be predominantly have Australian players in there. That's how, I came over and played with Storm, but there was a mix, and like Chargers have moved from that sort of a scenario like that, where they've actually got just a really good balance of players. But it's trying to sort of make that competition as good as it can be, because then if you do that, it also has a good knock-on effect to the sort of the Premier competitions as well. Like the sort of the size of the Midlands Premier competition this year, it's just gone from
blown up.
Yeah, and it's like nearly 20 teams across the Premier and the Merits,
and they're still cropping up.
Yeah. So we did see some teams pop up, or new clubs pop up through that COVID period. We've got a better process now for any club that comes in to us to sort of say, look, we are interested in doing rugby league. There's a process now. I work quite closely with operations, and there's a sort of cemented process that everyone knows what they're doing, and we can get those teams through that early period where they're not sure what they're doing, and then also put them in touch with key people. I did one the other day, put him in touch with Alan Robertson from Coventry, a guy who's experienced, has been involved in the game forever, really puts a lot back in, and having access to people like that to be able to speak to a new club.
Yeah, and give them experience, yeah.
And then sort of gives them a few pointers is just exceptional. And I don't know how much that would happen in other sports.
Yeah.
So that's something that we do really well, I think.
Well, we're kind of pushing on for time now. I just want to ask one more question, and then we'll kind of see if there's anything you want to throw in as well. But what is it about rugby league in London that people kind of outside wouldn't know?
Oh, do you want to guess first?
Take time to think about it.
I think there's almost a hidden subculture that you don't really know about, and it consists of a little bit of the alumni from Broncos days who've been there through the years. It's touched a lot of people's lives, and I think we don't realise that, and we probably don't do enough to harness it. Today I've got 3 friends who played at Broncos Academy with me. All 3, I imagine, haven't done much with rugby league in the last few years, but they're coming back because they are Broncos. They're always Broncos.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's probably the biggest thing I want to try and harness, is the idea that community clubs or no community clubs, we're in London, we're all Broncos here. So yeah, we got a subculture, we just need to get it out and work on it a bit.
Brilliant.
And I'd probably say that the connection between different people in the game down here, I think, is sort of the challenges that everyone faces, and it might be, I don't know, an under-14s team has to travel an hour and a half or 2 hours to a game on a Saturday, like those sort of things, and then the challenges that not being a sort of the main sport in an area, it's challenging, and those challenges bring people together, so they're more likely to work together and collaboratively than work against each other. even though they want to beat each other on a Saturday or something like that. So I think that, for me, it's the relationships and the friendships between the people that are involved in rugby league. They always get in to support each other. And I think the other thing is just the opportunities that London Rugby League brings, or having a strong presence in London, the capital, will bring to the game.
Brilliant. Well, I've got one more question. It's a little bit offbeat. Obviously, Steve, you mentioned the South a lot, but you've got such a huge area to cover. How do you see the RFL developing the other? Because it seems to me, speaking to you both, that London's actually quite a success. Certainly, community level feeding up, and especially with London now in the Super League, it's a tiered pathway. How do you see you being able to emulate that into the other areas? Really?
Yeah, it's
a big area, isn't it, for you to cover? That's what I'm.
And I think that's where the points I was making before about, yes, I am the only one based down here, but there is other people in my development team.
Yeah,
we'll be running women's and girls programs, school programs. So it's working really closely with them, but working closely with the stakeholders on the ground to be able to make sure they get that support. I think of probably the last 18 months, I've started to work more closely with the Midlands.
Yeah.
Where before I was just London and the Southeast based.
Yeah.
But I went from being a London regional manager to a Southern Regions regional manager, trying to give that extra support, I guess, to those other regions, because we talk about London, and London's great because there's a capital and there's a really strong presence there, but there's also a strong presence and strong opportunities in the other areas as well, and we need to work together with them and bring them up to that same sort of level. Look, London's got an advantage because it's the capital. It's got at the moment it's got a Super League team in it, so there's no getting around. If you have a stronger profile in the game, then that works wonders. But it's also trying to build that infrastructure underneath that allows the game to grow naturally as well. And I think in the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen that start in And in terms of participation and the number of clubs and teams popping up, it's really happening there. So trying to work and it is a challenge. It's trying to give equal time to each region.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I'm based in London, the southeast, so I live in Sussex, so that's a bit easier to be able to. And my knowledge is there more so because I've worked in some guys since 2007, but hopefully I can the more I get to work with these other regions, I can start to use that experience and knowledge and do the same stuff.
Needs a nines tournament, something, doesn't it?
I'm just going to say,
well, do you know anyone who's running one of them?
Okay, just to kind of finish off, is there anything that we haven't asked you that you'd kind of like to, to say on the air? And if not, don't worry about it.
Well, what I'd like to say is probably thank you to all the people who supported my journey, which has been part of other people's journeys, and it goes back to a guy called Bev Risman, who was really instrumental in getting not just me but many youngsters in London to actually play the game. Dave Rotherham, who was huge, he was our coach at the academy level. Tony Ray, Mike Eccles, Chris Baxter's been absolutely huge for me. So these are people who I think have contributed to our journey. We contribute to other people's journey. We're all on the same page. And that's why I think working rugby league is such an amazing thing. So just a big thanks to them, I think.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, I don't want to thank anyone. I just think Nash. Nash Ravine. No, just joking. Just a widespread thank you, really. I think, there is challenges. It's tough. It's not as straightforward as some, but just the commitment that volunteers at the coalface put in, it's just fantastic. I think having that, if you don't have that, you don't have a game. And I think you could probably say that across all parts of the country. People volunteer in the sport because they love it, and it's a great sport. It's brought me, loads over the years. I've been involved in it since I was 7, but it's brought me friendships. It's brought me, it's the reason I'm still here. It's brought me a family and a wife and a child. And it's just, it's a lot more than a sport, I think. And you just like to, for the people involved, to be able to let them do what they do and try to support them as best you can. But big thank you for those people that put that time and energy in. And thanks to you guys too.
Yeah.
Because we talk about the profile and the getting that word out there and sort of bringing that networks together. And I think what you guys are doing is fantastic. And the nines will be excellent. Looking forward to that in April. So keep up the good work and thanks for coming down.
Yeah, no,
'Cause that's the other thing.
Cheers.
It's good when people come down and see what's happening down here. So thank you.
Well, I've got to say, it's been incredible to talk to you about Nash. You know, what you're talking about there with the pathways is just fantastic. The overall, strategy with the southern area of Rugby League is fantastic as well, Steve. So, it seems like London Rugby League is in great hands, and if you two are an indication of what's going on and who's driving it forward. So thanks for taking the time.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, guys, we spent 50 minutes chatting and you've sort of sold Southern Rugby League to me, and I feel like London's one of my other teams now. That's genuine. Our feeling. It feels like Craig says, Southern Rugby's in a really good place, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it all unfolds the next 12 months.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
That's the final whistle for this week's episode of the Rugby League Outsiders. We hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow us on social media and share this podcast with your friends. And as always, if you have a story to tell, a club to plug, or a player that deserves recognition, we want to hear from you. So until next time on the Rugby League Outsiders, take care.